Hey guys, how are we all doing? It's Fanfic Reader here. Today we are back with Avengers of Steel, Chapter 8, Motherhood and Apple Pie. Bit of a weird title for a chapter, but who cares? Sorry I couldn't do this last Saturday, but I had a pretty busy weekend, which caused me to not be able to record this, which is unfortunate, but it doesn't matter. I'm here now. Oh, and before this begins, I just wanted to make something clear that I'm trying something new with this new video. Normally I would have pictures in the background, like painting the situation a bit more, but this time I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm just going to have a couple of still images, like a little slideshow while this is happening, which hopefully will give me more editing time to make the actual recording more, well, better, to be honest. You know, like sometimes in audiobooks, you get little background sounds and stuff like that. I'm going to try that with this one to be a bit more authentic. So yeah, let's see how this goes. If you like it, let me know in the comments. Are you ready? Let's do this. Avengers of Steel, Chapter 8, Motherhood and Apple Pie. Natasha had done a lot of unusual things during her missions. Being trained as a spy and as an assassin since she was a child had pretty much guaranteed that she had lived the most diverse situations. As a kid, during training, she once killed a man by pretending to be just a lost child on the street, crying and afraid, looking for her parents, only to assassinate her rescuer with a needle in the eye. She infiltrated a strip club once as a young woman and became so sought out because of her beauty and sensuality that the club offered a closed-door performance to a group of Russian politicians, which then she proceeded to slaughter alongside her bosses and co-workers. And maybe one of her most regretful jobs, there was the time she had to infiltrate Stark Industries as Tony's secretary, having to go so far as making some of her co-workers sick so she could have the privilege of taking documents directly to him in order to be able to assess his personality for the Avengers Initiative. That job still kept her up some nights. Sitting at a table on a farm, eating a huge piece of apple pie while being shown baby pictures of the alien she was pursuing by his adoptive mother was a new one, even to her. "Oh, look how cute he was," cooed Martha, pointing at a particularly cute one where Clark was sleeping in a crib. Natasha, of course, knew what she was trying to do. It wasn't as if she was being subtle about it. She was a government agent pursuing an alien. Not long after an alien invasion that left the world terrified, she was after a potential threat, someone who could be a danger to Earth and everyone on it. Martha was providing her another perspective. It wasn't subtle, but it was effective. "Oh, we were so relieved when he began to sleep peacefully like that," Martha continued. "We didn't know what to do before." "Was he sick?" Natasha asked. "How could we know, dear? He arrived in a spaceship. He might have looked human, but he definitely wasn't," she explained, serving Natasha another piece of pie. "The doctor thought he might have something wrong with his hearing and did the test to see how well he was listening." Clark yelled so loud after that little click that every single glass object in the neighborhood broke, including the car windows. Natasha raised her eyebrows. "Quite the pair of lungs," she remarked. "Oh, you have no idea. He almost made us crazy in the beginning, crying loud enough to shake the house. He was a handful as a kid." Martha smiled, remembering her past. "I mean, normal parents have to worry about their kids hitting their heads or choking on something. The things we had to worry about were slightly different. When Clark was learning how to walk, for example, he fell down and hit the wall. Now, thank God he didn't hurt his head, but his head did hurt the wall. He made a hole and fell through the house. We had to run through the door and around the house to pick him up." Natasha couldn't help but smile, eating another piece of pie. "And of course, there was the time Jonathan had the brilliant idea of teaching him how to play football. Clark tossed that ball so far that we never found it again. It probably left orbit," Martha laughed. But I wouldn't trade that for anything." "Weren't you afraid?" Natasha asked. "Oh, of course we were. But we were never afraid of Clark, dear. One thing I wanted in this life was to be a mother," she said, placing her hand on the top of her womb. "But nature was not so kind to me. I couldn't have a child. I prayed every single day so that I could have one. And one night, a baby boy fell from the sky right in front of our house. If that wasn't an answer to my prayers, then I don't know what is." That rang particularly deep with Natasha. She also couldn't have a child of her own. But not because nature was unkind to her. People were. "Do you have a kid?" Martha asked, gently, seeing Natasha look at the baby picture. "I can't be a mother," Natasha answered, almost inaudible after a while. Martha placed a hand on her shoulder. "Being a mother is less about this," she said, touching softly Natasha's belly. "And more about this," she finished, touching her heart. If giving birth was all it took to be a mother, there would be a whole lot of more happy families out there. But it's not. Family is more than just sharing blood, dear. Natasha was genuinely touched by what Martha said, and a little embarrassed because of it. You said you weren't afraid of Clark? She asked, because she was curious and eager to shift the conversation away from her. What were you afraid of? The government. Anyone that could take Clark away from us, really. The first few weeks where we were sure someone would show up at our door, but no one came. Jonathan had a friend who managed to speed up the process of adoption and keep it quiet. But until that happened, we had a lot of tense days. And of course, raising an alien couldn't have been easy, Natasha added. Oh, if you only knew, Martha answered. But I couldn't be prouder of the man he became. That Natasha could believe. Alien or not, Clark was Martha's son, and it was clear she loved him. Usually the love of a mother was a poor indicator of someone's character. Every villain had a mother after all, and they usually loved their children regardless of what they did. But Martha did not look like a mother who would turn a blind eye to the son's bad decisions. Quite the contrary, actually. That boded well for her assessment of Clark. While Natasha was thinking that, a loud sound thundered like the sky was being split in two, and she immediately took her hand to the concealed pistol in her jacket. Oh, don't be afraid, dear, Martha said, obviously noticing her alarm. That's just Clark. Was he arriving by a supersonic jet? What could possibly make a sound like that? Her questions, however, went unanswered, as the sound disappeared and everything was silent for a few seconds until a voice came from outside. Mom! And the door was pushed open with a force. Natasha's first thought was that Clark was an imposing man, much taller than herself. Built with as much muscle as Thor or Steve, Clark walked into the house like a huge predator looking for a threat. His blue eyes crossed the room, fixing themselves on her, and for a second Natasha actually froze in place. It was a dangerous look, lacking the rage that the Hulk had, but with the same promise of utter destruction to those foolish enough to challenge it. He thought she was a threat to his mother, Natasha realised. Clark Joseph Kent! Exclaimed Martha suddenly. What do you think you're doing, bashing the door like that? Clark was obviously surprised, his eyes losing their intensity as he looked to his mother. But Mom! No but, we are having a civilised conversation here. There is no need to make a ruckus. Before her very eyes, Clark seemed to change completely. The force of pure destruction that had entered the house was no more. What she was now seeing was just a young man being lectured by his mother. The change was so absurd that she almost smiled. A mental image of the Hulk being grounded playing on her mind. Chastised, Clark closed that very door, this time very carefully, and began to approach the table. He was a handsome man, with a very nicely sculpted face and chiseled jaw. His eyes were extremely blue and his hair was dark, loose in a carefree way. Like she had already noticed, Clark was very tall and very well built, the kind of muscles Natasha had only seen on super soldiers as guardians or unbelievably trained agents. All in all, Darcy Lewis's description of him as a dark-haired, hunky, blue-eyed beefcake of a man was on the spot, in Natasha's humble opinion. Clark, this is Natasha Romanoff. As I'm sure you already know, Martha introduced as Clark got close to the table. She wants to ask some questions about that spaceship you took. How that woman could make a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent questioning about the hijacking of an alien ship sound exactly like the principal called and told me what you did in school. Natasha didn't know. She imagined it had something to do with being a mother. Clark looked at her, his expression a mix of surprise and resignation. I'm sorry for entering like that, he apologised. I was scared about a known assassin alone with your mother, Natasha finished. Well, yeah, Look, I was wrong. I apologise. He extended his hand. I'm Clark Kent, but I guess you already know that. You can just call me Clark. Natasha Romanoff. She shook his hand. Smiling, Martha pointed outside. Show her the farm, Clark. You two need to talk. And I have another pie in the oven. She turned to Natasha. But make sure to come back after you talk. You have to try the apple pie straight out of the oven. With my homemade vanilla ice cream. That did sound really good. Natasha couldn't help but think, but focusing on her mission again. Yes, ma'am, she answered, smiling, getting up and following Clark to the door. Both of them got outside. It was a sunny afternoon, very pleasant, even if a bit chilly. The Kent farm was a beautiful place, with fields of green grass, apple trees everywhere, cows eating quietly, and an honest-to-God windmill. It reminded Natasha of Clint's house, only without the kids running around. At the same time as Natasha observed the farm, however, she did observe Clark too. She didn't think he would run or attack her, that wasn't a concern, but she did want to learn as much as she could, and there was a lot that could be interpreted by body language alone. Clark was nervous, that much was clear. She would even go far as to say he was afraid, but she doubted that was for himself. His mother, then? A weak point the Black Widow deep in Natasha's mind whispered. One that could be explored by someone with intention of causing harm. There was also the fact that he probably wasn't used to being recognised by what he was. An alien. It was something Natasha could understand, at least a little bit. Her entire life she hid in the shadows, never really letting anyone see her for what she was, until the shroud was removed during the Battle of New York. She had fought alongside the Avengers under the bright daylight in front of God knows how many witnesses and cameras. She was a celebrity now. Everyone knew who she was just by looking at her. Worst yet, they knew what she was. Of course, most of what she did was never public, but being recognised on the streets, having action figures designed after her likeness, and seeing children dressing up as her was still very disturbing. Clark was feeling like that as well, she imagined. His entire life he had to hide what he was, hide what he could do, never being able to completely be honest with anyone out of fear, or maybe rejection. Yes, but also the fear for his family and for his safety. And now an agent from a spy organisation had shown up on his doorstep. How did you find me? Clark asked, suddenly stopping by the side of the fence. Natasha stood by his side, watching his face for a moment. The ship, she said, turning to look at the horses. You saved Dr. Foster and Miss Lewis's lives and stole the ship being guarded by the military of 2 countries. It called attention. I imagine that, but how did you do it? I thought I covered my tracks pretty well. She smiled a little bit. You didn't make it easy. I talked with Dr. Foster and Miss Lewis trying to profile you, got a general description of your appearance and, more importantly, a general description of you yourself, how you act. From there, I spoke with the manager of Arctic Cargo. He pointed me in the direction of Cassidy Pub, where he had hired you. There, I spoke with Chrissy. Chrissy. How is she? She misses you, Natasha answered softly. You know, there are worse things than settling down with a beautiful girl that likes you. He smiled, sadly. There are, he agreed. But she deserves someone who can give her a normal life. I can't do that. He didn't say anything else, so Natasha took that as a signal to continue. Now, Chrissy told me you moved from Cordova, so that was my next stop. I almost lost you there. No paper trail at all. My compliments. He smiled at her little joke. But, like I said, I managed to gather some of your behaviour patterns. You helped people. Everywhere you passed, no exceptions. So I looked for a weird happening. People being helped in unconventional ways. The oil rig, he guessed. The oil rig, she confirmed. I managed to acquire footage of the event. That surprised Clark. There was footage? He asked, surprised. Well, there's always a camera, Natasha said, pointing up. Satellites make sure the entire world is always being watched. There was no way to tell it was you, but I knew what I was looking for. Right, he said, obviously bothered. With the footage I managed to find of the boat you were on, before you swam to the oil rig. The Debbie Sue, he said, smiling, the pride and joy of Captain Harrelson. The Debbie Sue, she nodded. Captain Harrelson, of course, had only the fake name you gave him, but he did remember you talking about some weird town. She intimidated his voice. Dimmyville? Small city? Hail Smallville, that's it. He took his hand to his eyes. Yeah, he did have a good laugh when I told him that. Well, with that, I came all the way here. Since I didn't have your name, I did the same thing I did on Cordova and looked for weird occurrences. There was quite a lot of them, but only one with a witness. Peter Ross, one of the students on the school bus that dove off a bridge and was saved by divine providence. Pete? Is he still working at that IHOP? He is. And he was the one who pointed me in the direction after I convinced him I wasn't a threat. I guess being a world-famous hero has some perks. Clark just kept staring at the horizon for a few seconds, then he turned to face her. So, what now? Am I under arrest? He asked. Natasha leaned on the fence by his side. Now, we get to know each other a little bit, she answered. He eyed her. Just like that? Just like that, she confirmed. I'm not here to arrest you, or to kill you. I doubt I would even be capable of that, given the things I already saw. I'm going to be honest with you, Clark, you're an unknown, an incredibly powerful one at that. If my boss had seen what you did on that oil rig, he would have had an aneurysm. Clark smiled, but there was no trace of happiness in it.
My father believed that if the world found out who I really was, they'd reject me. Out of fear.
Natasha tilted her head. In my experience, the world is never ready for anything. Things just happen. We try to be prepared, to always be one step ahead, but predicting everything is impossible. So we just learn to roll with it. He didn't answer for a whole minute, just looking at the sun, thinking. I didn't even know that I wasn't human for most of my life, he said abruptly. I knew I was different, of course, but the thought that I wasn't human never crossed my mind. What happened with the school bus, when I took the bus out of the water, Pete saw me. He was scared, so he told his mom, so she came here with him. Telling my family what happened was divine providence, a miracle. So I asked my dad if what she said was right. And what did he tell you? He showed me the ship I arrived in, told me that I wasn't human at all, that somewhere else had another father who gave me another name, and that he sent me here for a reason, and that I owed it to myself to find out what that reason was. Clark fiddled with his shirt and took out a pendant, a weird black object around his neck. This was the only thing I had on me when I arrived, he said, showing it to her. It was a black prism, a few centimeters long, with an S shape on the end of the extremities. No messages, no notes, just this. My father brought it to a friend so he could analyze it, but the guy couldn't figure out what it was made from. Whatever it was alien. Natasha didn't say anything, just kept listening, interested. After my father died, I went out into the world looking for clues, anything that could give me a direction. He shrugged. I found nothing, and for a while I was really beginning to lose hope that I would. Until one day this little thing just began to float. Float? Yeah, spin like a compass, always pointing north. I didn't understand what it was doing, since it never did anything like that before. But I had nothing to lose, so I started to travel north. Until I arrived on the very restaurant you were, Cassidy Pub. And when I was working there, I began to hear conversations about something the military had found on Ellesmere Island. Something under the ice. Something not of this world. So I did what I could to get there. And you found the ship, Natasha stated. He smiled. And I found the ship. Imagine my surprise when I found an entrance that fit my pendant precisely. And my astonishment when that seemed to turn the ship on, and a man appeared out of nothing. Natasha raised an eyebrow. Out of nothing? A hologram, generated by the ship because of the pendant, that took the form of my biological father. Clark smiled, seeing the surprise in her eyes. Yeah, shocked the hell out of me too. But in a good way. I had so many questions about what I was, where I came from, what I could do, why I was sent here. She was staring at him now, entranced with the story. Where do you come from? She asked. I was born on a planet called Krypton, he answered. It was the birthplace of an ancient and very advanced civilization. Long ago, in what they called the era of expansion, the Kryptonians spread out through the stars seeking new worlds to settle upon. That ship on Ellesmere Island was one of thousands that was launched into the void. They built outposts on other planets using great machines to reshape environments to their needs. And for 100,000 years, the Kryptonian civilization just flourished. Natasha was unable to speak while listening to this tale, trying to imagine an empire with that magnitude. Eventually, however, they stopped, Clark continued. The exploration was abandoned, the outposts left behind, the ships were called back, and an artificial population control was established. Krypton had exhausted their natural resources. They just isolated themselves? She asked. They tried to limit and control the use of the resources they had left, Clark clarified. But they did a very bad job, and later on, somehow, they decided to mine the core of the planet to get the resources they needed directly from there, even against the advice of the Kryptonian scientists. That doesn't sound good, Natasha summarized. No, it doesn't sound good at all, Clark agreed. Instead of finding ambience of resources, they only managed to make the core unstable. It accelerated the decay of the planet and the core just imploded. The picture Clark was painting was not a happy one. She imagined Clark was a member of a civilization like the Asgardian one, somehow stranded far away from home on a planet that was not his. By the looks of it though, Clark didn't have a home planet anymore. Krypton? Krypton doesn't exist anymore, Clark confirmed somberly. What they did couldn't be stopped. My father, Jor-El, was one of Krypton's brightest scientists, and he foresaw the calamity. He tried to convince the Council to do something, to at least try and save some part of Krypton's heritage, but by that time one of Krypton's military leaders attempted a coup. Clark looked at Natasha. My parents placed me into a spaceship that very same day. Moments later, the man who attempted the coup, General Zod, murdered my father and was arrested alongside his soldiers. He looked back at the horizon. Krypton blew up not long after that. Natasha could barely imagine something like that. As unique and detached from others as she was, Natasha was still surrounded by humans. Even after leaving her birthplace, Natasha was still on the same planet, with the possibility of visiting or hearing about it anytime she wanted. Clark was alone, the last son of Krypton. No home to go back to, no fellow Kryptonians to talk to, no knowledge about their culture. Utterly and completely alone in a world that was not his. Natasha didn't know anyone who could comprehend living like that. I'm so sorry, Clark, she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. And she really did mean that. He didn't look at her, but he acknowledged her with a nod. Thank you. Both of them stayed in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the heat of the sun and the sound of the birds. I don't know much about my past, Natasha said, breaking the silence. I was taken when I was still a child to be trained as an assassin. My life before that, my home, my parents, they're just a bunch of images and feelings I occasionally have when I dream. She didn't know why she was telling him this, maybe in part to share the burden, maybe to share hers. Wherever the reason, it seemed to pick Clark's attention. Wait, they took you as a child? He asked, clearly shocked. That's normal. Kids are easy to indoctrinate. They learn faster and they don't question. They're perfect to be trained. I was going to say awful, but I don't think that's enough to describe this, he corrected. She smiled. That too, she agreed. Anyway, what I meant by this is, don't think about what could have been. The life you could have had with your parents in Krypton. The life I could have had with my parents in Russia. Wishful thinking. What happened, happened. It's not going to change. What we can do is change the future. Clark considered her words and smiled. The only direction in life that matters is forward. I heard that one before. Then whoever told you that is wise, because they happen to agree with me, Natasha stated, smirking. That seemed to lift his spirits, even if a little bit. So she decided to press on. What can you tell me about your abilities? She asked, wanting a more detailed explanation of what he could do. He considered his words for a moment. Krypton was a harsh place, he began. So life in there evolved just as harsh. When the first living organisms began to appear, Krypton was just a rock filled with ice, with gravity way stronger than Earth's. So as time went on, the first animals adapted to survive on these conditions, growing strong muscles, dense skeletons, stuff like that. The cold and the lack of food were maneuvered by the ability to absorb radiation directly from the sun and use that as energy. Clark looked at Natasha. Now Earth's environment is much richer, the atmosphere is more nourishing, gravity is weaker. The sun is much younger than Krypton's was. It's strong, it's yellow and bright, and my cells drink in its radiation, strengthening my muscles, my bones, my skin, my senses. I'm stronger than a human by a very wide margin, quicker and much more resistant. My senses are also more developed, he shrugged. I've grown stronger here than my father ever thought possible, and the truth is I'm still getting stronger, so I can't really tell much about it, because even I don't really know what I'm capable of. If what he did on the oil rig was any indication, Natasha would put him just next to the Hulk in terms of raw strength. The fact that he was still getting stronger, however, made his potential impossible to be measured. And that was difficult to swallow, quite frankly. One of those things that were, at the same time, amazing and frightening. You don't have to be afraid of me, you know, Clark said, as if he could hear her thoughts. I have no intention of doing anything against the people of Earth. Natasha, this is my home. The people here took me in, and they loved me, and who I love back more than anything. I'm not a threat to this planet. She held his stare for a long minute. I believe you, but I'm not sure my superiors will, not without some type of guarantee. Such as? Let me introduce you to my boss. He is one of the good guys, even if a little paranoid. He appeared to be thinking about it. If I go with you, then I want something in return, he countered. What? She asked. My name? My identity? I want you to promise me that the name Clark Joseph Kent won't be put into any SHIELD systems. What do you mean? She asked. Natasha, if people know who I am, they'll know who my mother is. That can't happen. This is S.H.I.E.L.D. We're the good guys. We can protect. No. She sighed, putting her hands on her waist. Those two women you saved in the ship, they were very important to Thor. Jane Foster is his girlfriend and Darcy Lewis is his friend. When Loki attacked, we protected them. Do you trust everyone there, Natasha? Every single person in S.H.I.E.L.D.? He asked suddenly. His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. Loki was an external threat, but what if someone from inside decides to threaten my mother? What if they think it's a good idea to use her to control me? Natasha wanted to tell him that would never happen, but that wouldn't be true. There were less than unsavory characters working for S.H.I.E.L.D., even if they were the good guys. Thor is the prince of a very powerful, very advanced civilization, he continued. If someone threatens Dr. Foster, that can very well mean the beginning of a war you can't win, so it won't happen. I don't have that sort of pull, so if someone ends up putting my mother at risk... She raised an eyebrow, slowly. Is that a threat? He did not back down. I won't kill anyone, Natasha. I don't do that sort of thing. But if someone inside S.H.I.E.L.D. puts my mother's life at risk, I will hold this person responsible. Even if I have to tear S.H.I.E.L.D. down to do it. And there won't be enough places to hide. Bunkers strong enough to defend them, armies big enough and well equipped enough to stop me. I will take them to prison, even if I have to build the prison myself. And the incredible thing was that Natasha believed him. His eyes when he arrived and entered his house, thinking she was a threat to Martha, appeared in her mind. Eyes of someone who would not let a loved one be harmed. Not without retribution. She didn't know if he could win a fight like that against the entirety of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s forces, but it wasn't something she was willing to bet on. Not only because it didn't make sense to antagonize him, but because she only put her money on what she was sure she could win. Fury might not like it, but it was certainly doable. Clint was a living example of that. His family's safety and autonomy was one of the things he demanded when he started working for them. Okay, that can be arranged. What should I tell them? She questioned. You can tell them everything, except my name. Instead, tell them my name is Kal-El. That way my human identity and my mother are safe. Kal-El? She repeated, rolling the name on her tongue. It's my birth name, he explained. She nodded in response and looked at him, his blue eyes staring at her. I'm choosing to trust you, he said, his voice serious. Don't let me down. Natasha nodded, having no intention of betraying his trust. She would share this with Fury only, and he would most definitely trust her judgment as he did before. S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't really have anything to lose with this. They would still know who Clark was. Even if his identity wasn't in the system, Clark knew that, no doubt. So even if he went against his own word and pulled a Loki, he knew that his mother would be at risk. She didn't like that, and she wouldn't hurt an innocent. But the possibility of that happening would keep Clark honest, even if it did put a bad taste in her mouth. Okay then, we have a deal, Natasha said, raising her hand, which he shook. Now, about the ship, no, he answered quickly. That ship is the only thing I have left from Krypton. It belongs to the House of El. Natasha knew that was true, but technically she was there because of the ship. The army is going to whine non-stop in my ears, she sighed. He at least had the decency to look apologetic. I'm sorry, but I really don't trust those guys with this kind of technology, he explained. Not after what you did with the Tesseract. Natasha turned fast as lightning. How do you know about the Tesseract? She asked, sharply. Clark met her eyes, not looking concerned in the least. Why do you think that after 20,000 years of silence, the ship began to emit a distress signal? He asked. Someone, either the army or S.H.I.E.L.D., messed with something they didn't understand. The Tesseract is an infinity stone. It has more than enough power to crack this planet like an egg, and you guys played with it? The radiation that escaped from it could probably be felt light years from here. To those who know what they're looking for, like the Kryptonians who obviously knew, the ships on the era of expansion were equipped to search for them, either to acquire them or to keep someone else from doing it. He was looking straight at her. So if you think I'll give them more technology to be misused, well, you're wrong. Clark lowered his eyes, but Natasha didn't, his words still ringing in her ears. She knew the Tesseract was dangerous. She knew that messing with it was a risk. But the things he was saying were new to her. She looked straight into his eyes and asked, What is an infinity stone? Natasha did not expect him to turn to her that quickly, completely flabbergasted. Oh boy. Nothing gave Nick Fury quite as much satisfaction as seeing the pieces of his projects coming together, like one big puzzle slowly completing itself. Of course, the nature of his job meant that it was a never-ending puzzle, sometimes with not enough pieces, sometimes with pieces that didn't fit in at all and had to be discarded. And of course, there were times when a bunch of aliens just appeared out of nowhere and kicked the whole thing into a fire. But for now, things were doing great. Stark was actually being useful, not only in defeating Aldrich Killian and destroying that AIM nonsense he created, but also helping design the repulsor engines for the new helicarriers, making sure they didn't need to land anymore once launched. Steve Rogers was acclimating as well as he could to modern life, learning about new technologies and tactics with an impressive speed, and soon he would be able to lead the strike unity. Dr. Banner didn't have an episode in a long while and was apparently putting his big brain to use alongside Stark in a whole lot of projects. Barton, as always, continued to be one of his most dependable agents and was in the process of arresting the criminals involved in that mutant factory, together with Maria Hill and Captain Rogers. And now Natasha Romanoff finally contacted him to report about their missing alien. Things were good and Fury couldn't help to be happy while he looked at the horizon from the window of his office in the Triskelion. At the back of his head, though, there was always a little voice saying that things were too good. It wouldn't take long for something to go wrong. There was a knock at his door, and before he could say anything, it opened. There were only a few people crazy enough to do that, and he was only expecting one of them. "Miss Romanoff, I'm glad you're back," he greeted her, turning to see the red-headed agent walking to his table. Except she was walking slowly and with a hand on her stomach. That surprised him. "Are you injured?" She just waved her hand, sitting down. "No, just ate too much," she answered. That surprised him even more. If there was one thing that made her famous, besides her beauty and ability to kill, it was her self-control. "You ate too much?" he asked, expecting her to clarify. "Apple pie and vanilla ice cream," she said. "Turns out the mother of our missing alien is one hell of a cook." He leaned over his table, eye fixed on her. "What?" She sighed. "I found him," she began to explain. "I'll give you a full report later, but let me tell you right now, he is not a threat." "How can you be sure of that?" "Because I met him. I met his mother. And he's been living on Earth since he was a baby. He's practically a human. At least in behaviour." Fury sat down in front of her. "So what is he? Asgardian?" "He is a member of a race called Kryptonian. He is the last Kryptonian. His parents sent him here when he was a baby because their planet reached the end of its cycle and exploded. The last of an alien race, living under their noses during all its life." The only thing making Fury hold his temper was the fact that there wouldn't be another Kryptonian coming to Earth. Not like those damn Asgardians. But when he found the sector of S.H.I.E.L.D. that let this go unnoticed, heads would roll. "So, what can you tell me about him?" Natasha sat straighter. "Sir, he's a good guy. He's been helping people in every single place he's passed through. We are definitely not looking at another Loki. Not even another Thor. This one is unique. An alien that considers Earth his home and was raised by human parents. How did they even find him?" "It was the other way around. His ship landed on their farm. They just took him in. By hiding him and breaking God knows how many laws." "Well, sure. But I think it was better for all of us that this particular alien got raised by good people. His mother is a good woman, sir. She and his father raised him well." Fury sighed. He did not like it when things like this happened. Being the last one to hear something was as rare as it was dangerous. But he did trust Romanoff. If she was saying this alien was raised by good people, he would believe her. "So, not a threat then?" he asked. "Not a threat. Psychologically speaking," she confirmed. "But he is gifted. His kind are very powerful. So I recommend a lot of caution when dealing with him." "How powerful are we talking here?" he asked, already feeling the headache coming. And Natasha happily delivered it. While physically he is as strong as the Hulk, he is much faster than him now, resilient enough to survive an explosion of an oil rig right in his face and the whole thing falling on top of him without a scratch to show it. His senses are much more enhanced than ours. His body can absorb solar radiation and then liberate it in the form of energy beams from his eyes, hot enough to melt steel, and he can fly fast enough to break the sound barrier. Nick Fury was incapable of speech for a moment, and could only stare at Romanoff unmoving, his mind working overtime to comprehend the kind of thing they were dealing with. That was absurd, and it was the only conclusion he had. No one could have a power like that. No one should. They were talking about a being that could very likely, fight an entire war by himself and win. A being as strong as the gods of legend. A being with the potential to be the greatest threat this world has ever seen. He didn't have the words to describe the level of risk that was being represented. "Sir, I know what you're thinking," she started. "Do you, Romanoff?" "Do you really?" he said, his hands banging against the desk as he leaned forward. "Yes, I do. You're thinking that we're about to face a threat bigger than Loki and the Jatari. A threat too high to be properly quantified." "Okay, so you do know what I'm thinking." "Yes, but you are wrong," she declared. "Am I? Really? Sir, this man might be powerful, too powerful even, but he's also good." She looked in Fury's eye. "You trusted me all this time to evaluate threats. Trust me now when I'm saying that he is not one." She got up and went around the table, leaning over to type on his keyboard. "This man has been helping people all of his life," she continued while typing. "And I mean almost literally. He's been doing this since he was a kid. He helped people from car accidents, fires, drowning, murders, robbers. He even saved a whole lot of people from being unwillingly turned into mutants." Natasha pointed at his monitor, where the front page of the New York Bulletin was being shown. Fury took a second to understand what she meant, before reading the name of the author. "Clark Kent?" He looked at her. "He is the alien? He's been here in New York?" "Yes, he's doing the same thing we do. Saving people." She went back to the chair and sat down. "Fury, Clark is not a threat to us or to anybody, but he is only asking you to believe in him. But he is not asking for you to believe in him. He's just asking for time to prove it. I say we give him that." "And why would I wait for a bad situation to happen, Miss Romanoff?" he asked, wanting to hear her answer. "Because this bad situation might not happen at all. But if we attack him, if we make him an enemy, then he will have no choice but to be one. We have a chance to gain a ridiculously powerful ally if we play our cards right. But if we play them wrong, we will definitely gain a powerful enemy. So let's just wait." That was why Fury liked Romanoff. She could keep things in perspective quite well. And he did trust her. Few people could read someone like she could. And if she had seen something in this Clark Kent, then maybe it was worth waiting. Even if he could fear an ulcer already forming. "Okay, we do it your way," he finally said. "But things go wrong, it's your neck, understood?" "Of course," she answered, as if she didn't expect anything else. "And I want to meet him." That can be arranged," she said, slowly, and Fury knew she had something else to throw at him. "But I made a deal with him in exchange for that." Fury held his head inside. "Tell me." "His name, Clark Kent, can't go into the system. It stays between us." "And what do I tell the World Security Council, Romanoff? That the alien has no name? Tell them his name is Kal-El. That's his Kryptonian name. He's afraid for his mother, sir, and it's not like we'll lose anything by doing this." No, they wouldn't. That was true. But it was something they could use to bargain for later. "Okay, done. And what about the ship? When is he giving it back?" He did not like Natasha's face right then. He's not. "God damn it, Natasha!" He has a good reason. "Sir, that whole thing we did with the Tesseract, developing weapons with it, he doesn't want that to happen with his ship. It is the only thing he has left from his planet, so it does technically belong to him." Oh, I'm sure the World Security Council will just love that. I can just imagine that conversation going. "Yeah, about the ship capable of unquantified levels of destruction. It's a cultural heritage. We can't take it from him," he impersonated. "Well, then tell him that because of what they did with the Tesseract, we might have bigger problems, and it's their fault." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about something Thor apparently forgot to tell us." "Tell me something, Fury. Have you ever heard about the Infinity Stones?" Okay, guys, and that is the end of Chapter 8, Motherhood and Apple Pie. I hope you all very much enjoyed it. I know a lot did not happen in this chapter, but I really enjoyed this one. I really liked how Natasha and Clark first met. I thought it was very in character for both of them. But don't worry, next chapter things really start to pick up in A Night to Remember. Also, let me know what you think about my new recording style, about how I've handled the video. No more like pictures of people talking in the individual areas, but more of a slideshow where more detail is on the editing and the voice acting and the background sounds and stuff like that. So please let me know what you all thought of that. So yeah, it's been FanFic Read here, and I'll see you all in the next chapter of Avengers of Steel, A Night to Remember.